Kritika, we are live on YouTube now.
Good morning. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha, Param Vishishta Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Yudh Seva Medal, Vishishta Seva Medal, and Bar twice. His Excellency Shri Vikram Doraiswami, His Excellency Mr. Abul Hassan Mahmood Ali.
No, the name is Abul Hassan, not Abdul.
Abul.
Abul Hassan, I'm
Yes.
so sorry, sir. Abul Hassan Mahmood Ali. Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty, Ambassador Vijay Nambiar, Lieutenant General Asit Mistry, Param Vishishta Seva Medal, Ati Vishishta Seva Medal, Sena Medal, Vishishta Seva Medal, Professor Dr. Bimalan Patel, Vice Chancellor, Rashtriya Raksha University, serving and retired members of the armed forces and the diplomatic community, dear guests from Bangladesh, NCC cadets, students from various schools, colleges, and universities, ladies and gentlemen. I, Kritika Patil, on behalf of the School of Internal Security, Defense, and Strategic Studies and our director, Lieutenant General Asit Mistry, welcome you all to the last monthly webinar on the 1971 war to mark its 50th year. Every month, we have brought out new aspects of the 1971 battle. These webinars have been possible due to the guidance and foresight of our founding director, Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha, and it is an honor for us that he is present with us today as our guest of honor. These webinars were started after an issue of 10 1971 battles published by the Outlook magazine, following which the last 11 webinars were conducted each month. Following that, the first webinar was held on 16 December 2020, titled as Vijay Diwas 2020, Dawn of Golden Jubilee Year. Following that, veterans share their personal experience on select battles like Battle of Hilli in January, Battle of Naya Chor in February, a detailed discussion on Pakistan's genocide in March, Battle of Basantar in the month of April, naval operations in May, Battle of Longewala in June, followed by Air Force operations in the month of July, Battle of Cham in August, Battle of Fazilka in September, and ultimately, Fall of Dhaka webinar in the month of October. Today's webinar is the 12th in the series and is titled as Swarnim Vijay, Diplomatic Actions Before, During, and After the 1971 War. In today's webinar, we will start by an opening address by our director, by a guest of honor, Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, followed by a special address by the Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh, His Excellency Shri Vikram Doraiswami. Subsequently, His Excellency Mr. Abul Hassan Mahmood Ali, who is currently the Member of Parliament and the former Foreign Minister of Bangladesh, will highlight the Bangladeshi diplomatic actions during the 1971 war. Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty, the former Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh, will talk about the Indian diplomatic actions in the war. And Ambassador Vijay Nambiar, the former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan and former Chief of Cabinet to the United Nations Secretary General, will cover the international response and reaction. To conclude the session, the Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Bimalan Patel, will give the concluding remarks. These webinars could not have been possible without the people who worked tirelessly to ensure the success of the webinars, starting from Colonel Deepak Joshi, Nirmal Matthew, Kanchana Ramanujam, Saurav Rajpurohit, and Ishan Tong Singh. We thank them for their commitment and to the school and university. Before we start our opening address, a brief about Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha. He was a former member of the National Security Advisory Board, and he retired as the Deputy Chief of Army Staff. He was responsible for perspective planning, force modernization, and capacity development. He created the Army Design Bureau in 2016. Post-retirement, he was the founding Director General of School of Indian Defense Manufacturers. His in-depth strategic insight is based on his experience on 15 Corps Commander, as the 15 Corps Commander in Kashmir, Additional Director, General Military Operations, Division Commander in Strike Corps, Brigade Commander on the LOC in High Altitude, Battalion Commander in Counterterrorism in Assam, Company Commander in Counterterrorism in Punjab, and for 6 months on Siachen Glacier in the early days of Glacier War in 1986, and Deputy Regional Commander, United Nations Mission in Angola in 1996-97. His teaching and training experience include assignments held as Commander, High Command Wing, Army War College Commandant, Assam Regiment Training Center, and instructor, Indian Military Academy. He was awarded the rare distinguished grading on the Junior Commandant course. His academic qualifications include PhD on Irregular Warfare, MPhil and double masters from Madras University and Pennsylvania University, USA, and Diploma in Management. Before I hand over to Saha sir, a couple of housekeeping points. Please keep yourself muted. The Q&A session will be after the 3 speakers have spoken. Kindly address the name of the speaker while posting the question, and please post your questions in the chat box. With this, I hand over to General Saha, who has been a mentor to all of us here at SISDSS. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kritika, for a very elaborate and nice introduction. Very distinguished panelists, ladies, gentlemen, the Vice Chancellor, faculty, students of RRU and other colleges and schools who are participating. Let me begin by saying Jai Hind, Jai Bangla to all our participants. Well, at the outset, I must thank the Vice Chancellor, Professor Bimal Patel, for allowing this series of webinar to take place through the year and, of course, inviting me to speak this morning. Also, thanks, General Asit Mistry, for getting me for this capstone event of this series of webinar. It's an honor to be with you all. Well, as you all know, this is the golden jubilee year of the spectacular victory against Pakistan in an all-out war that was fought on 2 fronts, at the end of which almost 93,000 Pakistanis surrendered to India in East Pakistan, ending 24 years of Pakistan's rule and the atrocities perpetrated by Pakistan on a peace-loving people of their eastern wing. Bangladesh was finally liberated. The war changed the course of the history of the Indian subcontinent. Besides redrawing its geography, India catapulted itself as a power to be reckoned with in the world order. The estimate of Bangladeshi people killed in this genocide perpetrated by Pakistan range from 3 lakhs to 3 million. Unfortunately, the war crimes still go unpunished. This well-planned military crackdown, directed by President Yahya Khan, was meant to crush the Bengali nationalist movement with the HR set at 0100 hours on 26th March 1971. Almost concomitantly, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman declared the independence of Bangladesh. Described as a Holocaust unmatched since Hitler, Pakistan's objective of the genocide was to force the Bengalis to seek refuge in India so that a demographic change could be effected in Bangladesh. The number of refugees that fled to India touched almost 10 million in a span of just 4 months. Domestic opinion in India was in favor of very strong action. In fact, some of the state legislative assemblies, namely Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Assam, Nagaland, and Tripura, had passed resolutions recognizing the state of Bangladesh. Nonetheless, the central government, for very good reasons, chose caution, and they clarified sometime in July 1971 that we are not opposed to the recognition, and the decision would be taken at the appropriate time when we find that it is in India's national interest and also that of the freedom fighters of Bangladesh. The timing of India's recognition of Bangladesh was a critical decision, and there is much diplomatic and political interplay in this timing. Why, on the one hand, for the recognition to be effective, it was important that India had the capability to intervene militarily in East Pakistan. And on the other hand, there was a limit to how long the liberation struggle could survive in the face of Pakistan's barbaric destruction. The political leadership of East Pakistan, I must mention, including the Awami League, had for long tried to get their due within the larger construct of United Pakistan. They had not started this as a freedom struggle. They were literally pushed into a corner to do this. And this political struggle had started as early as 1948, when Jinnah refused to accept recognized as a national language. In fact, in the 1950s, there were riots in Bangladesh, in East Pakistan then. Besides this language and ethnic marginalization, there was inequitable distribution of national resource, economic exploitation of the Eastern Wing, and unfair political representation in the Pakistani parliament. The government of Pakistan, their negligent handling of the polar cyclone in 1970 was the proverbial last straw for East Pakistan. Riding on the wave of strong anti-Pakistan, anti-West Pakistan sentiment, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman won a landslide victory in the December 1970 general elections, securing 160 out of 162 seats in East Pakistan. And on the other side, his arch rival, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, his party had won 81 out of 138 seats in West Pakistan. You can see the distinction for yourself. But neither the military dictatorship nor Pakistan's political leadership in West Pakistan was prepared to share power with the East. Between December 1970 and March 1971, Mujibur Rahman's hope for a constitutional acceptance of his 6 points demand were finally dashed. These 6-point demands, without going into details, were aimed at removing the inequalities between the two wings of Pakistan. Planning for this military crackdown, Operation Searchlight, had commenced immediately after the election results were known. And by February of 1971, the surge in military deployment in East Pakistan had already been almost done, and the diplomatic preparations were also made. Yahya Khan was given a degree of assurance by America that they would be committed to Pakistan's integrity. By 1969, Pakistan was proving itself to be more than useful to the Americans by providing secret channels for communication with China. The US leadership, Nixon and Kissinger combined, were of the view that the China-Soviet Union tension could be exploited to benefit the US. Given China's size and growing importance, the US thought that it could leverage its relations with China to counterbalance Soviet Union and their involvement in the third world, and possibly also help an exit from Vietnam. The US tilt towards Pakistan had two immediate effects. First, President Nixon ordered a review of the earlier Johnson administration's US arms embargo, which was there for Pakistan. And the second, the US president issued directions not to squeeze Yahya Khan in this crisis. In other words, US would look the other way even as the deplorable genocide was perpetrated by Pakistan in the Eastern Wing. Meanwhile, facilitated by Pakistan, Kissinger visited China in July 1971. Following this visit, United States made it clear to India that they would not intervene in the event of a conflict between India and Pakistan, even if China decided to do so. In a sense, it was a warning for India not to go beyond a point. On the other side, if you see, the relations between China and Pakistan, they began growing closer after the India-China War of 1962. In 1963, Pakistan had illegally ceded 5,180 square kilometers of strategic territory in Ladakh, in the Shaksgam Valley to be precise. And also because of this Johnson embargo, uh, Pakistan was getting more and more reliant on the Chinese, both for military and economic aid. On the Chinese side, they were adopting a cautious stance because of multiple considerations. In early 1969, in the China-Soviet Union clash that had taken place along the Ussuri River on the China-Soviet Union border then, China had suffered relatively much heavier casualties. And on the Vietnam front, China's involvement in supporting Ho Chi Minh against the US was increasing. So China felt that trying to counter two superpowers on two fronts could weigh heavily, going into the future. Under these circumstances, Pakistan's efforts to bring a US-China rapprochement was too significant for China to be disregarded. Also, splitting of Pakistan was not in China's interest, as a liberated East Pakistan would naturally tilt towards India. So, overall, China chose to be indifferent to the massacre in East Pakistan, calling it an internal problem of Pakistan, even as it continued to supply arms and ammunition. China was bitterly critical of India's actions, like harboring Bangladesh's government in exile, accusing India of expansionism. The massive influx of refugees that took place was of very little concern to China. We need to also recall that India had open borders with Nepal, Sikkim, and Bhutan. Sikkim was not part of India at that time, and there were road links between Nepal and China, which could work to India's disadvantage. Also, between China and East Pakistan together, they threatened the Siliguri corridor that connected India with its northeast. And both China and Pakistan were fanning insurgencies, as we know, in East Pakistan at that time. Now let's go to Soviet Union for a while. We just had the visit of the Russian president yesterday. Now, with the China-Soviet Union rift intensifying, Moscow was keen to deepen its relations with India. In 1969, Soviet Union proposed a treaty of friendship to secure a special relationship with us. Initially, India was reluctant because of its commitment to the policy of non-alignment. But as the crisis deepened on 9th August 1971, the foreign ministers of India and the USSR signed the Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and Cooperation, which I think was a significant diplomatic achievement. This treaty, valid for 20 years, was aimed at expanding and consolidating the existing relationship of sincere friendship between the two countries. And Article 9 of the treaty categorically stated that in the event of either party being subjected to an attack or a threat thereof, the high contracting parties shall immediately enter into mutual consultations to remove the threat and take appropriate effective measures to ensure peace and security of their countries. Meanwhile, Pakistan, emboldened by the support from US and China and the ambiguous position taken by many countries, decided in August 1971 to issue a white paper which squarely blamed Mujibur Rahman and the Awami League for the crisis. Mujibur was tried for treason. 79 of the 160 elected members of the National Assembly and 195 of the 228 members of the Provincial Assembly were disqualified. Beginning September 1971, a civilian governor and 10 provincial ministers were appointed. Now, 2 of these 10 ministers were rebel Awami League leaders. The other 8 were unelected. So thus, having marginalized the Awami League, the government of Pakistan now ordered re-elections or by-elections for the vacant seats to be held from 25th November to 9th December 1971. So this was meant to be Pakistan's political solution to this crisis. The other point which irked India was Pakistan issued in August 1971 a district-wise list of refugees, which included approximately 1/4 of the actual number of people that had fled as a result of the genocide. And according to analysts, the list just about covered the Muslim refugees, implying that the Hindu refugees would not be allowed to go back. The situation was clear for India. There would be no political solution. So India therefore decided to build both military and diplomatic pressure. Military pressure at this stage was indirect by supporting the freedom fighters to increase their potential and operations manifold. Without going into details, as I believe this have already been covered in other webinars, India stepped up its diplomatic bliss at this time, literally an outreach, reaching out to London, Brussels, Vienna, Washington, Paris, Moscow, Bonn, and several others. On the 4th of November 1971, the Indian Prime Minister, Srimati Indira Gandhi, took a tough stance with her meeting with Nixon. The following day came that unfortunate remark by President Nixon when he called to say that Indira Gandhi was being a bitch. So that is the level to which things had dropped. Despite the mixed reactions in Europe, India was clear that there was no place for international mediation between India and Pakistan, and scaling down troop deployment from the border was unacceptable. In India's view, the solution lay with Pakistan releasing Mujibur Rahman and resuming negotiations with Awami League. On the ground, the Mukti Bahini operations increased in their frequency and intensity both. Pakistan made frantic efforts for UN intervention and concomitantly put up a facade of a civilian government. Yahya Khan was also grappling with several internal problems within Pakistan, somewhere between his desire to hold on to the power and Bhutto's desire to step in. And by now, Pakistan had assessed that Soviet Union was solidly behind India. And this is where I think the 3 vetoes by the Soviet Union was yet another phenomenal diplomatic victory that India managed to secure and gave us those critical 13 days. On the 3rd of December 1971, Pakistan launched preemptive airstrikes on Indian air bases along the Western Front. Pakistan's strategy was to attack in the West to be able to relieve the pressure in the East. This was more than enough reason for India to take that much awaited decision of recognizing Bangladesh, which India did, and the India-Pakistan War commenced. Besides the threat of whatever was happening at the UN, we need to also remember that by this time, the United States 7th Fleet had sailed into the Bay of Bengal through the Malacca Strait. The 7th Fleet, led by the 75,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, had more than 70 fighters and bombers. Clearly, India's time to execute an operation was rather limited. Despite the pressures, I think the war witnessed some very fine operational maneuvers by India's armed forces, executed in a superbly shaped diplomatic and political environment where the entire nation stood as one. I reiterate again, where the entire nation stood as one. And I think that was fundamental to that victory that we got. And in less than 13 days, Dhaka fell, providing the finest military victory for India, and more importantly, a victory for the people of Sonar Bangla against an unjust, oppressive, and fanatical regime. After the war, did we do enough to see that perpetrators of the genocide and the war crimes are punished? 93,000 prisoners of war and thousands of square kilometers of captured territory were returned for just redesignating the ceasefire line as line of control. Could India have consolidated and exploited this phenomenal victory better? The answer, unfortunately, is an emphatic no to all the three questions that I asked. On that note, I will stop here and thank you all once again for giving me this opportunity. And not to forget Krutika and the team she mentioned earlier for a brilliant job done through the year in making these webinars through. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Joy Bangla.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words and excellent opening address. Now we move on to the special address by His Excellency Shri Vikram Doraiswami, who is currently the Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1992. Prior to joining the Indian government, he worked for 1 year as a journalist. He has a master's degree in history from the University of Delhi. After his in-service training in New Delhi from 1992 to 93, Mr. Doraiswami was posted to the High Commission of India in Hong Kong in May 1994 as the third secretary. He was posted to the Embassy of India in Beijing in September 1996, where he served for nearly 4 years. Upon returning to the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi in 2000, Mr. Doraiswami was appointed Deputy Chief of Protocol. After 2 years, he was seconded to the Prime Minister's office. He later served as the Private Secretary to the Prime Minister of India. In 2006, he was posted to the Permanent Mission of India to the United Nations in New York as the political counselor. And in October 2009, he served as India's Consul General in South Africa. In July 2011, Mr. Doraiswami returned to MEA in New Delhi, where he was the head of the division for SAC. From October 2012 to 2014, Mr. Doraiswami was the Joint Secretary of the Americas Division of the MEA. He became Ambassador of India to Uzbekistan in October 2014, before being assigned as India's ambassador to the Republic of Korea in April 2015. Upon completion of his assignment, he returned to the headquarters in July 2018, serving as the head of division for Bangladesh and Myanmar. In April 2019, he was tasked with setting up a new division at MEA for the Indo-Pacific. Following a promotion in December 2019, he was designated Additional Secretary responsible for the international organizations and summits. Thank you, and can we please play the address now, Saurabh? Thanks.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this important commemoration of the victory of Indian and Bangladeshi forces in the Liberation War of Bangladesh in 1971. I'm grateful to the Raksha University for the opportunity to be part of this celebration of marking 50 years of the liberation of Bangladesh and India's role in that unique, geopolitically significant and also historically significant moment in South Asian and world history. I wanted to make a few quick points here, which I hope will be broadly in line with the purpose of this discussion and the issues that the discussion seeks to frame today. The first was why India got involved with the Liberation War and when that process started. The why of it is reasonably simple. 1971 was not too far off from 1947, and memories of most Indians of that generation of the horrors of partition and the violence done on all sides of the border upon ordinary people was fresh. So there was a strong moral and human outpouring of emotion in response to the launching of Operation Searchlight. Bad enough had it just been the denial of political and social rights and cultural rights of the Bangla people. So much worse when the Pakistan army decided to launch a fundamentally genocidal attack on the innocent people and the ordinary people of the then Bangladesh. So that part of it is, of course, reasonably simple to answer. But it is significant to make that point because it also answers the when question. Contrary to what people think, research today shows, and evidence in our archives also shows, that India's involvement in the liberation of Bangladesh really starts after the clear political mandate won by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in the 1970 elections, and thereafter the response to democratic outpouring in Bangladesh, the brutal response of the Pakistan army and the Pakistan state at the time, which essentially led to the crackdown on the ordinary people with the mass exodus of refugees. Thereafter, you can actually see the initial signs of Indian involvement. So in other words, Indian involvement really starts in any substantive way from April of 1971. The how of it is an interesting question also to answer, because I think that is very much fundamental to the purpose of this discussion. The how of Indian involvement essentially centers around the fact that this was perhaps the first time India had actually pulled together a grand strategy involving diplomatic, military, economic, and even domestic levers of policy to pull together a comprehensive response for something that was more than just a regional crisis. It eventually became a complex geopolitical and global issue following the celebrated journey of National Security Advisor Kissinger to China. The fact, however, remains that Indian planning and Indian foresight, primarily through the senior civil servants of the time who coordinated and were able to give constructive advice in tandem with the military leadership of the time to the political leadership in setting out achievable, carefully managed and carefully coordinated objectives without seeking to get ahead of themselves and put objectives ahead of what was actually deliverable, in focusing on building up capacity, both diplomatic and international lobbying capacity, and in terms of being able to pull together capacity to manage the situation and even to plan for the future. It is not well known or well recognized outside perhaps a few scholarly circles that considerable planning and forethought had gone into to each element of the strategy, to the decision on how to approach the world, in particular Western capitals, to the decision on how to approach the then USSR, to the decision on the framework in which India approached the world, bearing in mind the very strong sentiment globally at that point of time for territorial sovereignty and for the integrity of nation states. All of these were important factors, but equally important was the fact that government marshaled social forces and political forces to ensure that the massive outflow of refugees, some 10 million people, did not disturb either the social or the communal situation in the border states around what became Bangladesh, to mobilize economic resources to be able to feed and clothe and look after millions of people in a situation where India itself had only just emerged out of years of agricultural shortages and food shortages. All of these were massive achievements, but I would also personally like to highlight one specific achievement, which was in starting the process of planning for victory also, because evidence now suggests that with the interim government, or the government in exile at the time, considerable work was done to examine how best India could participate and assist Bangladesh in pulling together the mechanism of government, taking up the posts of government quickly, rebuilding infrastructure that had been shattered by the scorched earth policy of the Pakistan army, including railways and ports and river waters, but also in planning for the early return of refugees. Something like 7 million refugees were returned within 6 weeks of the Liberation War concluding, which is a massive achievement. Almost all 10 million people were returned by the middle of March. So in other words, within less than a year of the crisis having broken out, most of the people who were displaced were returned. And of course, in planning for the early removal of the Indian Army upon victory. It is again something that needs to be recorded, that there are seldom such examples of the removal of a supporting army within less than 3 months of a complete military victory. Each of these, I think, are issues that I'm sure today's discussion will be able to deliberate upon. I wish the Rashtriya Raksha University every success in its deliberations on this important and landmark moment in our South Asian history. And I would like to leave them with the thought that the question of what Bangladesh's success changed in terms of the larger historical narrative since 1947 also needs to be addressed. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to hearing and reading of the proceedings of this discussion.
We thank the Indian High Commissioner for his remarks. Moving forward to our first speaker, His Excellency Mr. Abul Hassan Mahmood Ali was born on 1948 in Dinajpur, Bangladesh. He was educated at the University of Dhaka and received BA Honours and MA degree in economics. He taught economics at the same university before joining the erstwhile Pakistan Foreign Service in 1966. In his long, distinguished diplomatic career, he served in various capacities at the headquarters and at Bangladesh missions abroad, which include New York as the Vice Consul, Acting Consul General, New Delhi as the First Secretary, Counselor and Deputy High Commissioner, and Beijing as the Deputy Chief of Mission with the rank of an ambassador. Mr. Ali served as the Bangladesh ambassador to Bhutan, Germany, with concurrent accreditation to Austria, Czech Republic, and Slovak Republic, Nepal, and High Commissioner to the United Kingdom with accreditation to Ireland. Mr. Ali is a valiant freedom fighter and made enormous contribution in the diplomatic front of the War of the Liberation of Bangladesh in 1971. He worked for Bangladesh's independence in the US and at the United Nations. Immediately after arriving in New York in 1968, he mobilized the Bengali community in the United States. He joined the Bangladesh Liberation Movement in April 1971 and was appointed as the representative of the provincial government of Bangladesh at Mujibnagar in the United States in May 1971. He also acted as the executive assistant to Justice Abu Saeed Chaudhry, chief overseas representative of Mujibnagar government and leader of the Bangladesh delegation to the United Nations in 1971. Mr. Ali has been the former foreign minister and is currently the member of parliament and the chairman of the standing committee for the Ministry of Defense for the Bangladesh Parliament. With these, sir, this is such an honor for us that you've joined us today, sir, and I hand over the stage to you, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Kritika Patil, for your long introduction. It's quite true that it has been a long time since we fought for the liberation of Bangladesh. We have already heard two of the distinguished speakers from India, especially General Saha. And I think the way I should start is by telling you what happened when I joined the Pakistan Foreign Service at the Civil Service Academy in Lahore in October 1966. It so happened that our great leader, father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, had announced his now famous 6-point program or solving the constitutional and economic problem facing the Pakistani state as a whole. In Lahore, on the 5th of February 1966. In other words, it was, as you must have learned, as you have seen, everybody has seen this great leader. We call him the greatest leader of the Bengali people in all our history. And he is the founding father of the independent Bangladesh in modern history. And he had the courage of conviction, and he had the strength of character to present his six-point program to solve the constitutional tangle in Pakistan. Well, since I joined in Lahore, by that time, the thought process of the Pakistani rulers, that is the Pakistan military. Pakistan, as you know, that even today, they have not abolished the permanent settlement, the zamindari system that was introduced by Lord Cornwallis in India, then British India. In fact, it was done in the name was still East Bengal in English, and in Bengali, Purbo Bangla. It was the name was changed much later. It continued till 1956 Constitution. There was a it was a kind of a experimental constitution when Mr. Chakravarty, who was the leader of Awami League, Pakistan Awami League. It was called Jinnah Awami League, but he was actually the leader, and he became prime minister as part of that party, of which Sheikh Mujib's party, the East Pakistan Awami League or East Bengal Awami League, was also a part. But that experiment of having parity of seats between then East Bengal or East Pakistan, whatever you call it, and the rest of West Pakistan did not work out. Although the Bengalis had made the sacrifice that despite the fact that the Bengali people were the majority in Pakistan, which many people don't realize that we were the 56% in Pakistan. And this was the reason why the people in West Pakistan, or the military to be exact, they didn't want this one man, one vote system, because in a democratic system, the majority rules. So since we had the majority population in East Pakistan, they were afraid that, they would not be able to continue their dominance or domination and exploitation of East Bengal. In fact, they started, the whole thing started right from the beginning in 1947, when India was divided by the British colonial power into India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan, with Pakistan's two wings being separated by 1,500 miles of India in between. Now, the whole thing was a non-starter right from the beginning, because Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, a young student leader at that time, he was in Calcutta when 1947, August 1947 came. And he had just taken his bachelor's degree from Islamia College in Calcutta. And then he come 14th August 1947, when Pakistan was established, he moved to Dhaka. And although he was very young, but he had seen through the whole game. He thought that, this is no liberation, this is no independence, because if we are the majority, then the capital should have been here, but instead the capital was established in Karachi. Karachi was a sleepy fishing village, and they had no money. West Pakistan did not have any foreign exchange earnings, or their national income was almost zero, so to say. And how could they build this capital with our money, with Bengalis' money? They took the entire foreign exchange receipts from here and established their first capital in Karachi. And then when Ayub Khan came to power, he took the capital away from the Karachi had become a metropolis of many kinds of people. So politically, I think he was not feeling very sure. So he moved it to Rawalpindi, which was a cantonment town established by the British. So he developed the second capital in Rawalpindi, and then the third one in Islamabad with our money, the poor Bengalis' money. The Bengalis were not poor, but they were being suppressed now. There's absolutely lines were drawn, and this leader, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, so after stepping onto soil of Dhaka, he could see what was coming. So therefore, he started right from the beginning, and he wherever there was problem with Pakistani rulers, like Dhaka University, fourth class employees, they were oppressing them. So he took the leadership. The Bengali members of the police in Dhaka, they were being harassed by the Pakistan army, the Punjabi-led Pakistan army. So he stood by the side of the Bengali police. So therefore, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was coming to the forefront gradually and taking over the leadership. In 1955, when a constituent assembly was elected for the whole of Pakistan, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, as a young leader, he had just come out of his role as a student leader, and he had set up the Awami League party after leaving the Muslim League. It was initially called Awami Muslim League. And then in order to accommodate the principle of, taking in everybody, irrespective of race, religion, creed, anything. So he changed the name from Awami Muslim League to Awami League. So this also gave his his commitment to establish a state or a nation state, whatever it is, on the basis of equal rights for everybody, irrespective of their religion, creed, or of their social standing, everything. So this is how it was developing. And in 1955, when the first Constituent Assembly of Pakistan met in Karachi, the members of the assembly, Constituent Assembly, could speak only in English or in Urdu. Now, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman rose on a point of order. He said that I want to speak. He was speaking in English. He said that I want to speak, but not in Urdu or English. I want to speak in my own language, which is Bengali. And our people have shed blood for the establishment of the right of Bengali language. Bengali is one of the most developed languages in the whole of the Indian subcontinent. And our literature, music, drama, you name it, everything is there, which you don't have in many other languages, especially, in your the other language here. So therefore, and you people, you don't have your own language. This is not your language. So he said that I must be allowed to speak in Bengali, but that was not done. And so he started his protest once again. Now, this went on, and I'll tell you, our present leader, the daughter of the Bangabandhu, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, she has picked out, she has recovered lots of secret reports that were stored in various offices of the police, army, and so on. And she is publishing all these gradually. And in a report by the head of the Pakistani intelligence in Dhaka, sent to his superiors in Karachi, he wrote that this young leader called Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, what he does from now on that will depend how the future of Pakistani state will come out, because he has very clear ideas and he doesn't mince words, and he's not afraid of anybody. So he wants to establish rights of his people. So this is how it started. And I think I'm making it too long. Now, since, we at Dhaka University, we have mentioned, Kritika has mentioned that I spent 4 years studying economics at Dhaka University and then another 2 years teaching economics as a young lecturer. Now, during the 4-year period, our teachers like Dr. Nurul Islam, who became the first vice chairman of the planning commission, of which Bangabandhu, father of the nation, became the chairman in 1972 after his return to Bangladesh. And then there was Dr. Huda, Dr. Anisur Rahman, these Rehman Soban, they became, members of the planning commission. So they have been our teachers and also colleagues later for 2 years. So we had very clear ideas about what is happening on that front, that the resources of Bangladesh are being exploited, taken away to Pakistan for whatever they were trying to do. And therefore, when I, along with some of my other colleagues, one of whom also became a minister with me, and later his health did not permit, and he could not run for election in the next parliament. But we started off together, and so we were absolutely convinced by the 6-point program that was put forward by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He had not become Bangabandhu yet, but almost nearing. And but still we refer to him, whenever we refer to him, we refer to him as Bangabandhu. So he, we were absolutely convinced that this is the way forward for us. So we went to the academy, myself included, and we, every one of us, as part of our curriculum, on one day we had to function as a speaker and on a designated subject accepted by the directing staff. And on another day, everyone has to function as chairman of that meeting. So for my speakership, I chose the subject titled Economic Development in Pakistan. And for chairing that meeting, there was some kind of conspiracy amongst us. So we chose the best, who could speak on that subject. My chairman would speak, Mustafa Farooq Mohammed, who also became minister with me, to which I referred a little while ago. So he would he would chair my meeting, and then he would speak on economic development and regional autonomy. And I would preside over that one. So in that meeting, we knew what was coming because our colleagues from West Pakistan, they branded us as, they called us names, the traitors, you are secessionists, you will destroy Pakistan, you don't believe in Pakistan, you are Indian agents, all kinds of things. So it was very tough to control the meeting. And but the directing staff, including our director, who was a very senior secretary of the Pakistan government. He had headed 5 important ministries, a ICS officer of 1939 batch. So they were writing in their notes, making comments and giving us marks for our performance. So they would not intervene in the running of the meeting. So I had a hard time, and then ultimately I thought that things are getting out of hand. So first I asked one of our colleagues to withdraw from the meeting, to leave the room. So he was looking at the members of the directing staff. So nothing happened there. So he had to leave. So then in 2 minutes, I asked another to leave the room, which he had to do. And the third one, his father was cabinet secretary. So he considered himself to be like crown prince. And they looked down on us that we are, poor Bengalis from East Pakistan. So I caught hold of him, and I'll tell you his name, Sayyid Azmat Hassan. So Mr. Hassan, I'm sorry, now it is your turn. You have to leave because you have been misbehaving all these times. So now time to go. Please leave. So he looked at everybody, nothing happened, so he had to leave. After that, things quietened down, and we successfully carried forth our mission. That's the discussion on the subject. So this was I mentioned this to give you an idea at the highest level of bureaucracy, this is how it was happening. And one could see that this 6-point program, why 6-point programs? I'll just mention 1 or 2 points. What it included was in 6-point program is that there will be 2 separate currencies and 2 separate reserve banks. The reason for this was it was already in effect by the other side, by West Pakistan, by the government of Pakistan. Because when you are coming from Lahore or Karachi to Dhaka, there is a customs checking in Dhaka airport. You cannot bring gold. You cannot bring so many other things. So you cannot bring currency in, beyond a certain amount. So therefore, they were treating us, West Pakistan was treating East Pakistan or East Bengal as a separate customs area. So this was already being done by you. But, when we wanted this in our 6-point program, when Bangabandhu wanted this, so he becomes a rebel. So therefore, I was absolutely, along with my other colleagues, we were absolutely hell-bent, that we'll carry on this fight for, this is the way forward, this 6-point program. This is the Magna Carta for the Bengali people. So I was, they had formed a committee of 3 to, assign places of posting. So I was picked up, I was offered 3, this will give you some idea about that mentality, that 3 places, choice of anyone, Calcutta, Ottawa, and New York. So I said, I agree with your, offer, except that the order has to be reversed. In other words, give me New York, Ottawa, and Calcutta. So they said that, can you imagine? They are saying, the committee is telling me, well, Calcutta is near to your home. Why don't you go to Calcutta? So if it is near to home, I know, but I can go to Calcutta anytime. It doesn't cost any money, hardly any money. But New York, with my salary or whatever I'll get, I'll not be able to go to New York. So I want to go to New York. So now they accepted. For some reason, I went to New York. Now, although I was vice consul, but this consulate and the UN mission, they work, so much together. Especially, it depends on the permanent representative to the UN. The permanent representative, the ambassador was Aga Shahi. and his elder brother was ambassador in Washington. And these two, they were refugees from Tamil Nadu, and they became they are like zamindars, landlords, and they would only remain in the U.S. Elder brother in Washington and the younger one in New York. So they would, oversee our activities, what we are doing. Immediately after reaching New York, I look for an organization which we can join. We found one, Tagore Society. Nothing could be better than this, So join Tagore Society. 5 of us. I did not know anybody because there are hardly any Bengalis. We used to say in the next days that there are about 500 to 600 Bengalis in the US and in 150 in Canada. So together it doesn't make even 800. So actual number might be even less. And these are scattered all over the US and Canada. Anyway, so they started, trailing me. So we joined the Tagore Society and started expanding our horizon and where everybody lived, and getting introduced, connected, how we can move forward, that things are hotting up in Pakistan or East Pakistan. So, the deputy deputy ambassador, his name was Yunus. He's also a refugee from Delhi. He's a Delhiite. So I found out that he had joined very recently the Ghalib Society. So one day he asked me, Mahmood, you have joined Tagore Society. So that's not very good because, Tagore is Indian. So I said, do you understand Tagore? Tagore is Bengali, Tagore is Indian, Tagore is universal. He belongs to the whole world. But as a Bengali, I'll always go to Tagore Society. I can't do otherwise. And by the way, Mr. Yunus, why have you joined Ghalib Society? Ghalib does not come from Pakistan. He's from India. He's from Delhi. Nothing to do with Pakistan. No, so all right. Okay, so you stay with your Tagore Society. I stay with my Ghalib Society. So all right. So this is how they were behaving with us. Come 21st February 1971. Before that, I'll talk about the, I think General Saha mentioned about this, the cyclone in November of 1971. So after the cyclone, a lot of aid came to, you tell me when should I stop? Because this story is quite long, So I try to tell you one or two other incidents because it's so long. I think I should summarize. I should give you bits and pieces, not the whole thing, because the whole thing will take a long time. So after the cyclone, a lot of aid came to Karachi for our people, for the cyclone affected people. According to Bangabandhu, that he was campaigning for the election which was coming up. So suddenly this cyclone struck and he abandoned his election campaign. He went to the islands and to talk to the survivors and see what is happening and how to help them. So all these assistance aid for cyclone affected people, they were all sitting in Karachi because Dhaka was not connected to anywhere. You can only go to Dhaka from Karachi or Lahore, or from Dhaka you can go to Karachi or Lahore. You cannot go to anywhere else. Today we can go anywhere in the world. So this is the difference between independent Bangladesh and the so-called East Pakistan under the hegemony of Pakistan, a direct control of the Pakistan military. Anyway, so the election you have heard from General Saha. In New York, what we did was that we wanted to hold a this 21st February our homage to martyrs of the Bengali language movement. You know, this was started by Bangabandhu, and he was put in jail as a young leader at that time, 1947-48. So there was a common hall which belonged to the two houses, one 12 East 65th Street between 5th and Madison Avenue in Manhattan, and the other one was 12. Consulate was 12 and 8 was the permanent mission. So we had a common hall. And there were, this hall was used by the Pakistanis or West Pakistanis for birthday, for marriage, wedding receptions, for all kinds of things, But when I told Ambassador Aga Shahi that I would like to use this common hall to pay homage to our martyrs of the 21st February movement, for the Bengali language movement. And he said, well, sorry, young man, we have to refer this. I think there might be a problem here. So we'll have to refer it to Islamabad. So I said, all right, you refer. So what does it mean? It means that they will not let us use this hall, which belongs to this. This was bought by our money, the Bengalis' money. They didn't have any money in those days. Anyway, so it was not allowed. So we still we held the Bengali language martyr commemoration in our Consul General's house, which was outside the main city on Long Island. But the Consul General who belonged to the 1949 batch of Pakistan Foreign Service, but has been overlooked like other Bengalis, was never, he had no chance of becoming an ambassador. So he lived a quiet life, and he said that, if I, if you hold this meeting, commemoration in my house, then I think my future is finished. So I said, you still think that you have a future? You have no future. So anyway, he allowed it to take place there. And then, then it was quite open that now, we are only working for the 6-month program and what Bangabandhu is telling us in Dhaka, in Bangladesh. So then we, we found a restaurant. We were looking for a restaurant. So Bengali restaurant, like you have thousands in the United Kingdom, but not so in the US in those days. So we found the address of one called Bit of Bengal. The name sounds very good, And we went there and started talking to the owner. So we said that, how did you get this Bit of Bengal name? So he was also from Sylhet, like, most of the restaurant owners in the United Kingdom, those who are familiar with that. So we have, when I left my High Commissioner's post in London in 2001, beginning of 2001, to retire from active service, government service, there were about 12,000 so-called Indian Bangladeshi restaurants, of which more than 10,000 were owned and operated by our people from Sylhet district in Bangladesh. So, but this was not so in New York or in US. So there's this Bit of Bengal restaurant provided in Nucleus. So the owner said that, I asked him, do you have any organization, any community organization? He said, we have. So what is it called? So it's called Pakistan League of America. So I said, but are there any Pakistanis or West Pakistanis in your organization? So he said, no, these are all, like me, these are from Sylhet area. These are Bengalis. So if they are Bengalis, then why do you call it Pakistan? So he said that he had come to New York in 1950. So he said that, well, sir, but are we not Pakistanis? So I said that, yes, we are Pakistan. We are East Pakistanis. Oh, I see. But East Pakistan is also part of Pakistan. Yeah. So I thought that, amongst ourselves, we discussed that it will take some time. He will, to convert this fellow, because still he's thinking about Pakistan, Larke Lenge Pakistan, that sort of thing. So when the cyclone struck, then he changed his mind and he came to me and he said, sir, because it has to be registered with the authorities. So he said, now we'll change the name to East Pakistan League of America, which is good, which is, some improvement. So this was done. And we held our first, protest march just in front of the UN Secretariat. All of you must be familiar with this. So in those days, they allowed this kind of small protest on the sidewalk in front of the UN Secretariat building. So we did that, and there I was told that somebody from the UN press wing is looking for me. Who is Mr. Ali? So then I met this gentleman, Dr. Jogendra Kumar Banerjee. Dr. Banerjee, J.K. Banerjee, he was an associate of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and he was director of the Free India Radio set up by Netaji in Berlin during the Second World War. So he was also a professor in Calcutta University, professor of political science. And now he was quite old at that time. He's like 68, 69. And I was, say, about 28. So despite the difference in age, we liked each other very much. And Dr. Banerjee became our guide, friend, philosopher, and guide. So he had an office in the press section of the UN on the 3rd floor. So which I started using, I along with my colleagues, we started visiting him quite often. And what do we do? And then we were nearing 1971. We knew, we were hearing what is happening. And then I went to see Ambassador Somur Sen. Ambassador Sen, India's permanent representative to the UN. He comes from, his family, he belongs to ICS of 1939 again. And he comes from Dhaka. Now it's called his parental home. Now it's Dhaka has been divided into subdivisions, have been made districts. So it's called Manikganj now. So his family comes from that area. So, we became instant friends, and I called him Dada. So he said, if you call me Dada, then you have to see Dada anytime whenever you like. And we exchange views, and hard days are coming. So his nickname was Tinu Sen. He was known amongst his friend circles. So Tinuda, I call him. So Tinuda. And then there was another gentleman, who was Consul General of India in New York. But he was also accredited as ambassador to a number of countries in Latin America. So his name was Vishnu Ahuja. One day I was surprised. I got a call from him, and he said that, during my first year of posting in New York, I had solved a problem of a Pakistani scientist, nuclear scientist, who had come to the States and then he disappeared. He was there, but his family, his wife and children in Lahore, Punjabi, they had lost track of him, and he did not communicate with him anymore. So I, with a great deal of effort, I located him. He had married an American white lady. So I called the lady. I said that your husband is, he'll be convicted of bigamy. You can't do that. So she was very scared, and she said, no, 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 he has not done it right. So I would like to settle this thing. You tell me how to do it. So I told them that you have to go to Lahore. If you don't go, your husband has to go. He has to make this settlement and all that and come back. Anyway, so this is how I became friends with Mr. Ahuja, because they had something like this of an Indian doctor. So he asked me, how did you solve that problem? So you advised me. So I started, getting close to him. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, sir.
Yeah, I think, yeah, then I'll just maybe 2-3 minutes.
Sure, sir, sure.
Yeah. Then Vishnu Ahuja was instrumental in organizing the, George Harrison's concert, now famous concert, the Concert for Bangladesh. And that was absolutely superb. Of course, George Harrison's friend did matter, but the whole thing was organized by Mr. Ahuja on behalf of Indian government. And of course, we supported it. It was a big success, and the Bangladesh issue came to the fore before the whole world in one go. And Ravi Shankar, then Ustad Alauddin Khan, and all of them were there. George Harrison's colleagues were there. So it was a big thing. And immediately after the liberation of Bangladesh, Mr. Ahuja was appointed as Mrs. Gandhi's government appointed him as ambassador, India's ambassador to Moscow. So which was a terrific acknowledgement of his services. So anyway, there were bits and pieces, and we were working together. And ultimately, the time came when the Pakistan government tried to send me away from New York. So I said that I have no news from my home, from my family, friends, so I can't go anywhere. I'll stay put here. So ultimately, this Mujibnagar government was set up, and then Pakistan government had issued orders for my return to Islamabad. So I left the Pakistan government because I can't stay any longer. So I asked for political asylum, and the newly established Bangladesh government in Mujibnagar, they appointed me as their first representative in the United States. And after that, we did a lot of things together with all our Indian friends. Then all these meetings in the UN, they had been going on. And Mr. Sen had made remarks which touched our hearts, like when the Security Council met in December, first week of December. Then we came up with an idea that Justice Abu Said Chowdhury, the Chief Overseas Representative of Bangladesh government and leader of the Bangladesh delegation to the UN, unofficial delegation, of course, but many of the countries which were under European colonialism, they were being assisted they were accepted by the UN. In our case, this was not in our case, they did not do it, especially Mr. Uthan, the Secretary General of the United Nations. We had sent a letter by registered post with acknowledgement due to the Secretary General, because he was not receiving us, he was not seeing us, he would not accept any paper from us. So this is how we sent it. It came back with the explanation from the post office that sender is unknown, that the recipient does not know the sender. So this is something which does not speak highly of Mr. Uthant. Oh, he did not see us till the end. He would not see us. Anyway, so that was, a long story, and finally, nothing, as they say, that nothing succeeds like success. So we succeeded along with our Indian friends, and many thousands of Indian troops, laid down their lives along with members of our Mukti Bahini. So we pay tribute to our forces, who laid down their lives, our Shaheeds, you also understand. So the martyrs of the liberation war, along with those of Indian armed forces who also laid down their lives for our liberation. And the blood of the Bangladesh martyrs mingled with the blood of the Indian martyrs. So therefore, today is this month, on the 16th of December, we are calling it Vijay Subarna Jayanti. Jayanti, you understand. Subarna also you should understand. And Vijay also you understand. So therefore, today, once again, I take this opportunity to express our appreciation, our gratitude, and our thanks to the entire people of India, to the government of India in those days, especially to Prime Minister Mrs. Gandhi and her colleagues, and all the political parties. I met many of them in New York, later in Delhi also, when I went to serve in Delhi. So I came to know people from across the all factions, this CPI, CPM, everything, all of them. So we are, this kind of unity of the entire Indian nation, Indian people, political parties, this is something that is unprecedented in human history. So I think I take this opportunity again to convey our thanks, and may the friendship between the peoples of Bangladesh and India live forever. May it grow from strength to strength in the coming days. So I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the heartfelt narration. This is indeed an honor for entire university in India to have witnessed this. Thank you so much. Sir, with your permission, we can move on to the next speaker, sir.
Yeah, please do.
Next speaker is Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1977 and held key appointments in a long and distinguished diplomatic career. After the historic establishment of diplomatic India and Israel in 1992, he was a member of the diplomatic team that did pioneering work in boosting and setting the course for bilateral ties as Deputy Chief of Mission from 1995 to 99 in Tel Aviv. During this period, he was instrumental in coordinating the acquisition of sensitive Israeli defense technologies by the Indian Armed Forces and laying the foundation of bilateral security ties. As the director in America's division of the Ministry of External Affairs, he was part of several sensitive negotiations with the United States of America and nuclear and IPR issues through the early 1990s. He has served in Indian diplomatic missions in Cairo, Jeddah, and London, and was the Consul General of India in Karachi, Pakistan. Ambassador Chakravarty has considerable experience in South Asia. He had 2 diplomatic stints in Dhaka, first as the Deputy Chief of Mission and then as the High Commissioner of the Indian High Commission in Bangladesh. During his tenure, he laid the foundation for the historic land boundary agreement between India and Bangladesh, as well as key strategic and security issues of mutual interest. He also served as India's ambassador to Thailand and helped further India's Look East policy by engaging with Thai government and business communities. As the secretary overseeing economic relations, he was the key to negotiations within the BRICS for establishing deep partnerships. He also oversaw all lines of credit extended by India as part of its foreign aid programs. Post-retirement, he also serves as the president of the Association of Indian Diplomats and as Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, Delhi. He frequently appears as a commentator on television and is a prolific columnist writing on a range of issues related to India's foreign policy, South Asia, and its national security interest. With this, I hand it over to you, sir. Thank you so much. Looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me in such a distinguished panel. It's a great honor and privilege to be here. We've already heard Honorable Mahmood Ali giving you a glimpse of India's diplomatic initiatives and challenges that face the country at that very, very crucial hour. Let us recall the time because that is very important. It was the height of the Cold War, and India had to navigate the fault lines of the Cold War. And hence the challenges were plenty. And India had just come through the 1965 war, and which, by the way, also were the initial feelers that were given by Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. In fact, it is probably been recorded in Ambassador Chandrasekhar's new book that his ultimate goal was independence. And so those were some of the sort of inputs that came in through our sort of diplomats who were serving there. And I shall name some of them later. But basically, we were faced with a situation internationally where we had to ensure that India, if it had to achieve the objectives that basically of the liberation war and the independence of Bangladesh, we had to ensure two things. One was that the UN did not interfere. And secondly, we needed the support of a powerful country like the Soviet Union at that time, which was, it was a bipolar world. Cold War was raging. Because we knew that the USA and China were going to be ranged against us. The US, the Kissinger-Nixon duo were keen to utilize that connection to somehow confront the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union too was in a thinking mode at that time because it was earlier balancing between India and Pakistan. But when we approached the Soviet Union, and that was done diplomatically, then the Soviet Union quickly realized that this was a good time for them to help India and achieve the objectives, because they were also interested in the same objectives, though they had certain issues later with us. Now, the fact that even many Pakistanis felt that there was no military solution is now available in the archives. Lieutenant General Yaqub Khan, for example, clearly had written down in his dispatches that a political solution was necessary. And so I think when the crackdown happened in March, it was, I think, pretty clear that which way this thing will go. Initially, by the way, the diplomatic assessment was conservative in India. And our diplomats felt that, a solution within the democratic framework of Pakistan was probably. Now, whether this was a public posture being conveyed under which we were planning other things is perhaps a matter of interpretation. And that, but then we realized that perhaps democratic solution, where of course we said that the power has to be transferred to the true representatives of East Pakistan, and that is the Awami League, which had won the election. But then we all know the obstinacy, the arrogance and rigidity of the military regime at that time, and it was probably more or less a foregone conclusion that these things would not happen. But I must say that the initial assessment, the diplomatic assessment, was secession may not be in India's interest. No, I don't know why this assessment was taken. My own feeling is that perhaps this assessment was part of a process of telling the world that India is not interested in interfering in the internal affairs or changing the territorial sort of status of Pakistan. Now, remember that we were in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, when the issue, the international law had become quite, focused on territorial integrity and non-interference in internal affairs. Article 2 of the Charter, etc., UN Charter, plus the newly emerged nations of Africa and Asia were very keen that these two principles had to be adhered to. And so India knew that at the international stage, she would be blamed for trying to dismember Pakistan. So we had the diplomatic effort was therefore directed towards creating an international narrative that this is not, India is not trying to interfere. It is actually Pakistan which is interfering in India. And that was the narrative which was built up because of the refugees, etc., that it is no longer an internal problem. It has already spilled over, etc. In fact, that was perhaps one of the first cases of humanitarian intervention. That, of course, came much later when after the post-Cold War, when the Western nations started using it, right to protect, etc. But then within India too, there was a section, particularly in the intelligence community, which had right from the very beginning felt that secession was inevitable, and that East Pakistan would become independent as Bangladesh. This reminds me that I was told by somebody, I have not seen it myself, that even in 47, when the British were carving up India into the two states, some of the British authorities had written because saying that East Pakistan is unlikely to remain as part of Pakistan. Way back in 47, they had, I think, noted this. So, and somebody else also had written that East Pakistan will one day secede. And another person wrote that it may secede and seek a union again with India. I mean, these are the kind of comments that were written at that time. But of course, one of them came true, that Bangladesh became independent. So I think this was the main challenge, the diplomatic challenge. Kritika, please stop me if I exceed. Huh? So give me a warning, because as Mahmood Ali Saab said, everyone can go on and on about these things. So I think that was the main challenge. And so those were the main highlights. The other thing was to prevent the UN from taking any precipitate action, and also to deter China and the USA from interfering in what was our objective and the Bangladeshi objective. So first of all, the Soviet Union, we did of course the treaty, which was many have criticized this for saying that we were no longer non-aligned, etc. But that's a different debate. So the treaty helped us in terms of the Soviet Union vetoing various resolutions in the United Nations, which were meant to say have ceasefire, etc., and all that. So and we didn't want the ceasefire so that the operations could be completed. Now the diplomatic intervention was also carried forward to project in the international media, for example, that this was how the people were suffering, the kind of atrocities and virtual genocide that was being committed by the Pakistani army. This was also projected in the international media. And this was, of course, through various our diplomatic efforts in different missions, etc. One other part of the diplomatic effort was to help diplomats in the Pakistani embassy, the Bengalis, who wanted to defect, for example, or call it what you like. They didn't want to be part of the Pakistani embassy or High Commission anymore. So that was another effort that the Indian diplomats took. But international public opinion was also a very, very important factor. And Mahmood Ali Saab has mentioned the Beatles. There were, of course, also Ravi Shankar, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, and many, many people. one thing became clear to us very early in terms of our diplomatic assessment was that international public opinion was in India's favor, in the sense that it had gone against Pakistan. So in that sense, France and UK played a much more sober role than the USA, which was, of course, had its own interest in, with the Soviet Union and China, etc. So those are some of the successes that Indian diplomacy achieved during that time. The other point was that Indian diplomats went out to tell different countries not to send arms shipments to Pakistan, because there were many such shipments in the pipeline. So I think those were some of the things that that were done during that time. Now, some of the names that come to mind, of course, the principal choreographer was Mr. P.N. Huxter, the advisor to the Prime Minister at that time. Then, of course, D.P. Dhar, T.N. Kaul, B.K. Acharya, S.K. Banerjee, Samar Sen, who was at the UN and who was mentioned by Mahmood Ali Sahab. And then, of course, later on, and then, of course, K.C. Sengupta and Ashok Ray. Ashok Ray was made the liaison officer in Kolkata. The first time MEA opened an office outside Delhi was this one, that in Kolkata to liaise with the Mujibnagar government and the government in exile, who were based in Kolkata and were coordinating with the Prime Minister Tajuddin Ahmed at that time. Now, basically, the other aspect of this whole effort became what is known as the growth of international consciousness in terms of humanitarian issues. That, sovereignty is not absolute in terms of international law, that I can do what I like within my country, kill people, whatever I can. That was no longer acceptable to the international community. So I think that was another major factor that emerged out of this. So I think this is broadly the diplomatic challenge we faced. And of course, there are lots of details of how we faced it. Now, just a couple of points about, for example, in the Shimla conference, which many have criticized as having lost what we gained in the war. Well, one can have any view on that, but it was never intended that we should resolve the Kashmir issue through this method, through the war of liberation, or we should change things on the Western Front, because we were not interested on the Western Front apart from the holding action, etc. The other thing that the diplomats did, and of course not just diplomats, but the whole of government approach that the then government had adopted, was that everybody played his or her part. Every agency, etc., played their part. Now, the other thing that I was trying to say was that there was an element of strategy, what Vikram had referred to as a grand strategy, that how to provoke Pakistan to a point where it had no option but to attack, or because they thought that now in what is happening in the East is becoming impossible to handle. So they had to open another front on the West. But India's actions were basically holding operations. And there again, I think there was international pressure, including from the Soviet Union, that, don't do anything on that side. Don't dismember Pakistan to an extent that those things happened. But as you know, I mentioned the question of deterring US and China. We succeeded in the sense that China was deterred. It never did very much, although Kissinger kept on pleading with them that you please open a front in the northern Himalayas, etc. But China didn't do that because they were worried more about the Soviet Union, with whom they fought a short war in '69, and the Ussuri, across the Ussuri River. So this was the scenario in which Indian diplomacy had to function. And at the end of it, we are judged by outcomes. So I think the outcome is there for all to see. Then, of course, post-independence, the missions started, Subimal Dutt, Mani Dixit, Dev Mukherjee, Chandrasekhar Das Gupta, then Arundhati Ghosh, who were all involved in all this. They all played their part, and many others. I don't have all the names, but I think this was how we actually planned the strategy and how we implemented it. And of course, the outcome is there. And I think I will stop here now.
Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed excellent, very crisp, very to the point, and covering everything that was needed to be covered. So with your permission, we can move on to the next speaker, sir. The next speaker is Ambassador Vijay Nambiar. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1967. He studied Chinese in Hong Kong and served in China from 1970 to 72, and he returned to South Block and Udyog Bhavan until 1976. He then served as a first secretary in Tito's Yugoslavia. He was posted from 1979 to 1982 in the Indian mission at the United Nations in New York and served in Delhi during the 1983 NAM conference and after. From 1985 to 1987, he was India's ambassador in Algeria. He returned to Delhi as Joint Secretary East Asia in the NEA in 1987 and helped prepare for Rajiv Gandhi's historic visit to China in 1988. Subsequently, he served as India's ambassador and High Commissioner in Afghanistan, Malaysia, China, Pakistan, and was a permanent representative to the UN in New York. Post-retirement, he served as the Deputy National Security Advisor of India. He was then deputed by the Government of India to serve in the United Nations Secretariat as the Under Secretary General Special Advisor to Secretary General Kofi Annan, and then as the Chief de Cabinet to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and later as advisor on Myanmar. With this, it is indeed an honor and request you to start your address. Thank you.
Thank you, Kritika. And with all that has been said, particularly by the last speaker, by Pinak himself, I think there is very little for me to say. But I'll just very broadly reiterate some of the points that, in fact, Pinak has made. In a slightly different context, perhaps I might give some little information about which is slightly different from China. Now, obviously, Pinak referred to the world as it was in 68-70, which was the polarized between military blocs, the US enmeshed in the quagmire of Vietnam, strong protests in Europe and the West, anti-war protests, which had actually shaken the very core of Western societies. This was also the time when the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact had marched into Czechoslovakia, and there was the famous Brezhnev idea of limited sovereignty, which of course didn't really have very much support around the world. It was after the Middle East. The civil war in Biafra was something. The People's Republic of China was not even recognized by the United States, even though the historic Kissinger visit and then subsequent Nixon visit took place. The UN had just about restored the PRC its membership in 1971. And the UN itself around two-thirds of its present, it was only around two-thirds of its present membership. Almost 65 states which are today members were not even independent then. And newly independent countries were actually slipping into domination by their militaries. Now, in this background, let me take just 3 or 4 very quick questions, issues, and I'll mention them, some of which has already been mentioned by Pinak. One is, why was the US so unwilling to exert pressure on Yahya Khan to grant greater autonomy to East Pakistan within a united Pakistan? The danger signals were already there, and even after the massacres perpetrated after Operation Searchlight, the blood telegrams were sent by the US mission in Dhaka. But it was only 2 people, Nixon and Kissinger, who were not prepared to what they call squeeze President Yahya Khan. Why was this? Mainly because actually Yahya Khan was actually their main contact, as it were, to establish the relationship with China. As you know, this was the time when after the Usuri incidents, which Pinak has talked about, the solidarity between China and the Soviet Union had broken, and particularly there was a time when the USSR became the main enemy, the Soviet social imperialists, and it is at this time that the attacks April and August 69 clashes that took place between the USSR and China brought a very major threat to China, and there were in fact there were reports of a possible even a nuclear attack, and there was great panic inside China itself. Now, it is at this time that Mao decided to move over to try and, in a sense, change the entire relationship and sought to improve relations with the United States. And for this, Pakistan became a unique bridge, as it were. And Yahya Khan was actually approached in 1969 itself, August 69. The fact of the matter was, both Kissinger and Nixon were extremely secretive about it, and nobody knew what the kind of actions that were taken, which were taken mainly through Hilali, Agha Hilali, who was the ambassador in Washington. And it is, in fact, at this stage that you found that whenever there was need for any pressure to be exerted, and the State Department, which didn't know what was happening, sought to try and get the American pressure to be exerted on Yahya Khan, it was actually Kissinger which kept saying that that President Nixon was not in favor of any kind of pressure, and he didn't want to squeeze Pakistan. And that people were, in fact, at least on two occasions in 1971, April and March, when the State Department kept trying to push the Pakistanis, wanted to push the Pakistanis, both Kissinger and Nixon were completely against it. This was the reason. It was because it was around that time that the reply from China regarding the sort of move to establish ties between the United States and China were first initiated. And it is precisely at this stage that when Kissinger was due to travel to China in July of 1971, that he stopped in Delhi on his way, and P.N. Haksar in fact told him that the problems that were created by the policies and the exodus of Hindus from Bengal was creating a major communal problem, but that we were determined to hold it, but something had to be done to pressurize Pakistan. It was Kissinger who kept saying that, India should not think of any action because the Chinese were certain to react. And subsequently, in the discussions, in fact, as you know, this was around the time when in May of 1970, the famous Mao Smile took place, and there were some moves, in fact, for an attempt to resuscitate, as it were, the relationship between India and China. The chargé d'affaires there was Brajesh Mishra. I was, in fact, at that time just posted to Beijing. It was almost in the immediate aftermath of the Mao Smile. But as you look at it now, you can see in hindsight that this was more a tactical move by Mao to try and, this was in the immediate context of the moves that they were making vis-a-vis the United States. But what happened was, after Kissinger went back to Washington, he made a very clear, he sent a very clear message to the Indian ambassador there that they could not expect any help from the United States in case of a Chinese response, in case Pakistan were to be attacked by India and the situation was to degenerate into a war. China would certainly intervene, and at that stage, they could expect no help from the United States. It was at this stage, after the July 18th meeting with L.K. Jha and Kissinger, that the efforts which were being made by the embassy by our embassy in Moscow and the resulted, and in fact, Mrs. Gandhi's realization that a historic change had taken place and India could not afford to remain alone, that the Indo-Soviet Treaty came to be established. Now, was the Indo-Soviet Treaty the only issue that, in a sense, inhibited China from any kind of active participation in the war? Perhaps it was one of the major elements that prevented, but there was one additional element which is not really known about very much, and that is the internal domestic politics inside China. This was the time when the famous Lin Biao incident took place. That is, in around the time of this was, in fact, it took place for over a period of time. The threats which the Chinese had faced from the Soviet Union had actually caused panic, as I had said, inside the Chinese leadership. And as a result of that, in response to that, the initial steps which the Chinese Defense Minister Lin Biao took were so dramatic that even Mao himself was a little surprised and actually felt that the defense minister had probably stepped beyond the bounds, and he was actually posing a challenge to the political hold of Mao Zedong himself. And this created a great deal of internal turmoil, and there was an attempt at that stage by Mao to try and curb the political power of Lin Biao. And actually, this resulted in a great deal of internal, let's say, political tension within the army, PLA itself. And things reached such a stage that by 1971 September, there was an attempt by the son of Lin Biao to launch a kind of coup d'etat, which would result even in the assassination of Chairman Mao. This was actually curbed quickly, and this was detected. And when the plot itself was detected, Lin Biao himself had to flee the country, and he died in September. It was actually September 12th in 1971 that he died trying to flee to the Soviet Union. Of course, as a result of this, over 1,000 senior senior leaders of the PLA were actually purged by Mao Zedong. Now, it is in this context that you could see the Chinese situation when, while they very, very strongly supported Pakistan and were virtually at every meeting, which in fact I used to almost accompany the Chargé d'Affaires, Mr. Rajesh Mishra, to many of the meetings, but we used to, despite the very strong verbal attacks, they were not in a position to actually join the conflict against India, primarily because the PLA was in no position to be able to handle any kind of conflict. And it is from that point of view that I think it was probably, apart from the fact that the Soviet Union, they could not face two fronts, it was clear that the army itself was not in a position to actually undertake any conflict. Now, this is the second point which I want to mention. The third point is which has been mentioned by Pinak himself was that the Soviet Union, while it had actually there was a strong degree of support to India, they were at the same time under very great pressure from the United States to prevent any attempt by India to move to the direction of West Pakistan in order to take the war after a possible victory in the east, to be able to move to the west. And there was, in fact, around the time of the attack, I think it was the exact date, I'm not sure, but it was around the time of September 6th or September 8th when the CIA in Delhi launched, it made a report saying that there was a cabinet meeting that took place whereby a decision was taken by Indira Gandhi to extend, to take the attack onto the West also and to cripple the West Pakistan. Now, this was an entire canard, but it was used by Nixon and Kissinger in order to put enormous pressure on Vorontsov as well as on Gromyko to put pressure on India not to take the fight out into the Western, to West Pakistan also. And subsequently, of course, both Nixon and Kissinger would claim credit for having actually stopped, as it were, a complete capitulation by West Pakistan also. But the fact of the matter was, I don't think there was at any time any serious consideration, and Mrs. Gandhi has actually come out on record to say that that of any kind of except for, of course, the kind of balancing action, but at the same time, no move by India to take the fight all the way to the West Pakistan, and this was clear when the surrender of Dhaka took place. They straight away, Indira Gandhi had announced that they were going to stop. The ceasefire was, in fact, was announced. Now, this is another aspect which, to some extent, it was also the Soviet influence, Soviet pressure, perhaps, on India that prevented India. I think it is probably not so much Soviet pressure as the innate kind of caution which Indira Gandhi had exercised right from the beginning, both in terms of when to start, how to go ahead, and in terms of trying to. She was obviously clear, as Pinak mentioned, that the temperament or the entire mentality in the international environment was against any kind of thinking in terms of the violation of sovereignty and territorial integrity of people. Non-interference was a major thing. The idea of in fact, if there were any major humanitarian interventions, as they were called, or the so-called responsibility to protect, which was a concept which only came out much later into the international lexicon. In the case of two major genocides that took place in Asia prior to that, in the 70s, there was no attempt, there was no articulation of the concept of responsibility to protect. It was only both in East Pakistan as well as in Cambodia. There was no kind of reference to the need for the rest of the world to show its sort of opposition or its entire objection to this kind of genocide, etc. But as on the one hand, the United Nations, and I think I think the Honorable Minister from Bangladesh had mentioned about how the U Thant, when he was approached, it is interesting that U Thant talked about inadequate information, and he talked about non-interference when asked he did, of course. He was conscious of the staggering dimensions of the humanitarian situation, but he kept harping on the question on what he called the non-interference principle and the absence of authoritative information. And in fact, he sent his special envoy, Ismat Kitani, to visit Pakistan. And that person, Ismat Kitani, was openly adulatory and fawning towards the Pakistani president rather than trying to put on any pressure on him. And it is this kind of attitude that actually represented both the unpreparedness of the governments that were members of the United Nations to put any pressure. As you know, the Security Council, when it took note of the issue of the growing tensions between the two countries, on 3 occasions, as the minister had said, the Soviet Union had to actually exercise its right of its veto in order, certainly the two against the United States resolutions. As it came forward, the public, that is the membership of the United Nations, took the issue to the General Assembly, and there almost 114, I think it's 104 or 114 votes actually were against India, and there were only 11 countries who were willing to support the position of India, and around the same number actually abstained. And this actually showed the sort of the opinion and the attitude of member states towards this kind of what they saw was the breakup of a country. Now, while the governments were at this stage were actually very, very conscious of these, the outpouring of international indignation and condemnation of what was happening, especially after Operation Searchlight, was clear. And this was, in a sense, was initiated, or at least the first great move, bringing the attention to the entire world, this entire of the massacres perpetrated by the army, was by a Pakistani journalist, Anthony Mascarenhas, who was in Karachi, who went actually in a delegation led by, in a sense, he was encouraged by the Pakistani army to go to East Pakistan. But what he saw, in a sense, pricked his conscience so much that in the process he took his story to the Sunday Times, and this was, in a sense, by one act, he was able to galvanize actually the conscience of the entire world. And this was what somebody called the globalization of conscience. And that actually was very deftly, I think, in a sense, leveraged by actions by Bengali organizations in the UK, such as Action Bangladesh and things like that, to bring up, to, in a sense, to weave this kind of an indignation with the anti-war, anti-Vietnam War effort people. And that's where the role of people like George Harrison, of Ravi Shankar, of and I said of various others like Clapman, Joan Baez, etc., which actually made so clear the differentiation between what the people of the world felt about what is happening and the governments of the world. And in some ways, this was a historic development because it actually changed forever the attitude, the attitude of the United Nations. And increasingly, the UN today is not just a collection of member states. It is the NGOs, civil society organizations, international public opinion is very much more, in a sense, involved in the actions and activities of the United Nations. And in fact, this is also reflected in the UN Human Rights Commission issues itself. Now, it is very, I think, from that point of view, the work with the diplomacy which India had actually generated over the on this issue between Indian diplomats and the East Pakistani diplomats of Bengali origin, who then galvanized themselves, I think they, in fact, managed to register an entirely new awakening in the international community. And I think that is one of the major things which we have to learn from this particular development. And in some ways, I would say that has also changed the nature of how the UN has looked at issues of this nature, as has subsequently happened in the world. I don't think I should, I've had actually a longish sort of analysis which was very carefully made in all four issues, but I don't think we have the time for this. I think I should probably stop here. There's really not much more that I would like to say, except that India's victory over Pakistan in 1971 was historic, unique, and decisive. And actually, this was achieved in the face of opposition from a majority of the countries of the world against the will of the United States. And as Pinak has also talked about the enterprise, which was the U.S. Task Force 74, which was sent in and which was in fact which India was able to face up to. The Indian leadership showed a strong adherence to a strong moral compass, a refusal to be bullied or sidetracked, and an ability to address its adversaries with patience, with courage, with steadfastness, and most of all, balance. And I think that is the kind of diplomacy which showed Indian diplomacy at its best. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your talk on the international reactions and responses. This was fantastic. Sir, we'll move forward to the Q&A session. And after that, we'll have our concluding remarks with the Vice Chancellor. So the question answer session will be conducted by our Director, Lieutenant General Asad Mistry. He retired in November 2021, and his last assignment while in service was as the Commandant of the National Defense Academy, Khadakwasla. He has also been the Colonel of the Regiment of Maratha Light Infantry. He's a graduate of Defense Service Staff College and Higher Command course. He has commanded an infantry battalion in Siachen Glacier, an infantry brigade in Upper Assam, and Rashtriya Rifles Force in Kashmir. He's currently the director at the School of Internal Security, Defense and Strategic Studies at Rashtriya Raksha University. So over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, sirs. First of all, I must express my sincere gratitude for very, very educative talks by all the four speakers that we have had. I'll just recap in short what we have covered till now. The talk by General Saha covered the entire gamut of how the 71 war unfolded right from the December 70 elections and prior to that. Ambassador Doraiswami spoke about the grand strategy and planning for the victory. And thereafter, Mr. Mahmood Ali brought out the kind of discrimination and prejudice that he personally faced, his experiences, the initial attempts at trying to restore kind of pride and rights of the Bengali people in the erstwhile East Pakistan, and then the Sixpoint Charter of Bangladesh, and the fledgling attempts of trying to create awareness in the Western world while he was at the US Embassy. We had a very comprehensive coverage of the larger picture of the diplomatic efforts by Ambassador Chakravarty. And the two major points he addressed were how India ensured and premature intervention by UN was prevented, and support of a major power in the form of the former Soviet Union, how was it garnered, and how a change in attitude of former Soviet Union itself was brought about in favor of India. Ambassador Vijay Nambiar covered the international aspects, and he particularly brought about some unknown aspects about the internal dimensions of political issues in China, particularly the Lin Biao incident, the kind of pressures that were there on the US itself to avoid putting unnecessary pressure on Yahya Khan, much against the advice of the State Department because of the ongoing parleys, the so-called secret parleys at that time for rapprochement with China, and the whole fallout of the Ussuri River engagement between former Soviet Union and China. We have had the entire gamut of diplomatic effort covered. We are already way behind our schedule, but nevertheless, we would throw open the house for some questions, whatever we can cover in the next 10-15 minutes. As Kritika had explained the rules, please send your questions in the chat box, and we'll try and cover as many questions as we've got. I have already got a huge list of questions from our audience. I'll select a few of them, sir, and throw it open to the panel. To begin with, there is a question for Ambassador Vijay Nambiar that did India, right after the brutal crackdown in East Pakistan, ever consider approaching the United Nations for an intervention? Was the US influence the only reason for such a poor response from the UN? Over to you, sir.
As far as India approaching the United Nations was concerned, it was more the UN Secretary General approaching India in the context of we had actually publicly made the humanitarian aspects very clear, because publicly I think India had said that the exodus of the large number of refugees from East Pakistan was going to be unbearable, and it would in fact require some response by the international community. At that stage, actually, it was the United Nations had tried to take, in a sense, proactive, consideration of this issue, but that was not from the point of view of meeting India's concerns. It was actually meeting Pakistan's concerns, as it were, and that was, from our point of view, clearly calculated in order to provide a kind of a whitewash to the Pakistani situation. And we found that that there was very little support for that kind of a thing, for India's position. And in fact, Mrs. Gandhi herself was clearly cognizant of this, because even in terms of how to approach our response, how to generate our response, whether we should be putting military pressure on East Pakistan, she was very, very careful, because she knew that for a large number of the non-aligned countries, it was not possible for India to be able to persuade them, because most of them were thinking in terms of the principle of non-interference. In fact, she found that it was countries like even Sirimao Bandaranaike was trying to initiate a kind of mediatory action by the non-aligned. And I think this was the kind of thing which she had to quickly actually nip in the bud, because this was becoming, it was clearly going to be a situation where there would be, in a sense, a kind of equalization of the conditions of both Pakistan and India, and that was not the kind of situation which she was prepared to accept. She wanted to have the situation of the refugees very clearly was addressed, and that could only be addressed by addressing the larger picture of the return or the some kind of a power arrangement which would take cognizance of Bangabandhu, that is Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's position in any new government. And I think that was the kind of a question which the United States was not prepared to accept. And then from that point of view, therefore, the UN, approaching the UN was a no-go.
Thank you very much, sir. So the next question is from one of our students, Pawan Chudasma. This question is addressed to Mr. Mahmood Ali. He says, you spoke about the inspiring life of Mujibur Rahman.
Correct.
Where he gave importance to Bengali language. And then he comes to the foreign policy. He says, what continuities or changes do you see in the foreign policy approach of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and his daughter Sheikh Hasina?
Well, absolutely. This is Bengali language, literature, music, drama. Not only Rabindranath Tagore, but there are others as well, and also Qazi Nazrul Islam, who is now our national poet. But the national anthem, which Bangabandhu chose for Bangladesh, was the poem Amar Sonar Bangla, Ami Tomaye Bhalobasi, My Golden Bengal, I Love You. So, and then there are many others like D.L. Roy, Dijendra Lal Roy, who's there's a song, Shokol Desher Che Shera Amar Janmabhumi. So this kind of thing, these are all part of our life, everyday life. And the basic theme, basic approach of Bangabandhu was that this Golden Bengal will be for everybody who lives in it, and irrespective of their religion, caste, creed, and economic station in life. So that's how he always talks about. He used to say in his speeches that the Bengali people are, they have been suffering for a long time. They've been subjugated for a long time. And even after the departure of the British, from one colonial rule of the Britisher, we have passed under another colonial rule, which is not usually thought of as a colonial rule, because they're supposed to be our same people, but they are not. They're not behaving in that way. In fact, they're trying to subvert, they're trying to suppress our language, our emotions, they started with the a very strange effort. They said that this Bengali alphabet is used by the Hindus. So the more proper would be to use the Arabic alphabet. So this was out of hand rejected by not only by Bangabandhu but all the Bengalis. We said that how is that possible? This is our alphabet is our own. This is how we have lived for thousands of years. So then they said that, well, maybe the Roman alphabet, like the Turks have done. So no, Turks, whatever Turks thought fit for them, they have done it. But this has nothing to do with us, the Bengalis. So therefore, we'll keep to our alphabet, we'll keep to our language, literature, music, drama, everything. So this is how he thought of, helping his people, who are not smiling anymore. This is in Bengali. Bangabandhu would say that Banglar dukhi manusher mukhe hashi fotabar jonno. Whatever he was trying, Bangabandhu was trying, was to give, to bring hashi, means that happiness, or so that they can laugh. They have forgotten there is no laughter in their life. There is no freedom, no nothing. So therefore, they're very sad. They're downtrodden. So we have to bring them up. So this was his mission in life.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question is about the Soviet policy and the Russian policy. This question says that, do you see any continuity in the Soviet foreign policy where present-day Russia is concerned? And has it been acting as a balancer between India and China as in the past? Can we have Ambassador Chakravarty to respond, please? You'll have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes, it's been unmuted. Yes. It's a very good question, particularly at a time when yesterday we had President Putin in town and Prime Minister Modi was discussing with him the future of our ties. The world has changed since 1971, and each country's interests have also changed. We are far more globalized, etc., etc. But it seems to me that the way India has proceeded with its foreign policy options, we are going back to an era of strategic autonomy. Not back, really. We've always adhered to that concept of strategic autonomy, that our relations with any country will be through the prism of our own interests and not through dictation or anybody by any other country. And I think you are seeing what is, I would say, a reassertion of that strategic autonomy and from the Russian point of view also, I think they also realize that the depth of the relationship with India is not to be discarded. I mean, they don't have other options as such. Because while they are being pushed into the lap of China because of economic and other reasons and because of sanctions by the West for what they did in Crimea, and what's going to happen, I don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine. So the question is that even Russia is hedging in the sense that it does not want to alienate India as well, although we disagree on certain things like Indo-Pacific and things like that. So, and the Americans too also have this CAATSA, legislation, which basically is a threat against those who want deeper relations with Russia. But we have actually conveyed a very, very strong message that whether there is CAATSA or no CAATSA, India is going to follow its own strategic autonomy, the prism that we have followed for a very long time. So I think you see a certain degree of recreating the Indo-Russian sort of link, the close link that we have had. Of course, it has been diluted because we are no longer fully dependent on Russia for our, let's say, defense requirements. We have defense ties with many other countries. And that is one of the reasons for strategic autonomy, that you diversify your requirements. And of course, Atmanirbhar and all that. The best, of course, is if you can do it yourself. Sorry, but till we do that, I think we need all these factors, all these sort of relationships to proceed ahead, given the kind of the hostile nexus that there exists between China and Pakistan, for example. So I think the relationship with the Soviet Union today is probably there is a bit of a nuancing going on, which is actually harking back to the old times. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, sir. The next question is for General Saha. So are you still around, or I think General Saha exited? No, I don't see him coming on video. Oh, it seems he's left. It's open to the House. Is the use of soft power in shaping the international opinion and moving the people to what Ambassador Nambiar said as raising the global conscience, use of George Harrison and Ravi Shankar concerts, various journalists being showcased properly, including Senator Ted Kennedy being brought to India and being shown the migration of refugees from the erstwhile East Pakistan. All this were a classic example of use of soft power, and these are the fledgling times of use of soft power. As times have changed, the dimensions of war have changed. The potential to use soft power has increased tremendously with the availability of social media and other platforms. How do you see the impact on future kind of conflict scenarios or challenges that we may face, and how do we exploit our soft power capability better? Sir, can we have Ambassador Nambiar to respond, please?
Oh, well, I was not sure whether you wanted me to answer this. Now, it is true that soft power is becoming increasingly important. But, soft power has various dimensions. Now, I don't know if in the case of China, for example, the fact that China has arrived on the international stage in terms of its comprehensive national power, and that it is now going through all these various iterations of its cultural background through Confucius Institutes and all that, is an attempt to make its soft power more apparent, and it's to try and push its what they call peaceful rise ahead. But I'm not sure that is having the kind of effects, because it has to be accompanied. When it is accompanied by wolf warrior diplomacy, that's not going to get the right message across. Now, it is true that there can be no substitute for hard power, and that strength is an important aspect of the assertion of any political interest of any country. But the fact of the matter is, countries like India have a kind of an ability to exert soft power which comes from the nature of its society. And I think that in some ways is different, because if you look at, I don't know who it was who said that many people admire and are in awe of China, particularly in countries like in the African continent, for example, but nobody wants to be like China. So in a sense, puts them, there is a certain exceptionalism, even in the kind of way in which countries assert their soft power. For example, everything about China is with Chinese characteristics. Now, when you say that, you actually automatically cut yourself off from the rest of the world and saying that you are separate. There is no universalism in the application of certain norms. And therefore you say, oh, because our system is different. Now, if that is so, then the rest of the world will also see that you are in a sense separate, and therefore we cannot hope to be like you or think like you. And therefore, why should we actually accept this situation? They are willing to accept the fact that in as much as some of these expressions are an assertion of a kind of it's actually a reflection of their own hard power. There is awe, there is respect, and there is fear. But except for some parts of Southeast Asia where there is a kind of, let's say, a cultural identification, but even there is, I don't think that this is actually quite as positive as the Chinese would think about. You just have to ask a Singapore diplomat about that, because they say that there's so much pressure from countries, from these countries face from China, to not just to speak out the point of view of the Chinese, but to actually think like them. I mean, it's really absurd sometimes, and you see that happening. But I think all that having been said, there is a certain place which soft power does have in the world. And in some ways, China has been, if anything, showing a negative example of how soft power, the limits of soft power. And I think India should be able to assert some of the positive examples by just being itself. I think we are in danger sometimes of actually following the Chinese kind of example rather than the others, because there is sometimes an effort to make ourselves exceptional, to make ourselves different, and to actually sometimes become a mirror image of some of the more intolerant kind of cultures that are there outside of the world. And that I think we should try our best to avoid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll now move forward for the concluding remarks by Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Vimalan Patel. He serves as the Vice Chancellor of Rashtriya Raksha University, the pioneering security and policy university of India. Dr. Patel also serves as the member of the National Security Advisory Board of India, a distinguished educationist, jurist, and administrator. Dr. Patel is renowned for his scholarship in the field of international law and international relations across the globe. During his professional career of nearly 30 years, Dr. Patel has served in various roles, such as director at the Gujarat National Law University, member of the 21st Law Commission of India, among others. A former international servant, Dr. Patel has served for 15 years at international organizations such as United Nations of Youth and the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons at The Hague, Netherlands. It is also a moment of pride for our university that he has been elected to the International Law Commission. With this, we look forward to his concluding remarks. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, can you hear us? He's facing some technical difficulties because of the internet issues. I request you all to wait for a few minutes, please. Go.
What happened?
Can I start? Good afternoon. Am I audible, Putika?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Perfect, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for this technical glitch. Very good afternoon to everyone. His Excellency Mr. Abul Hassan Mahmood Ali ji, Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty ji, Ambassador Vijay Nambiar, Lieutenant General Subrata Saha sir, Lieutenant General Asit Mistry, serving and retired members of the armed forces and the diplomatic community, dear guests from Bangladesh, NCC cadets, students from various schools, colleges and universities, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very grateful to the school for inviting me and to give my remarks on this final webinar. When the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi lit the Swarnim Vijay Masal from the eternal flame of the National War Memorial to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the 1971 Liberation War for Bangladesh, one could realize the importance of remembering the war. They say that history is always written by the victor, but the people of India believe in Satyamev Jayate. Truth shall always triumph. In 1971, the truth was on India's side. The atrocities on the Bengali population of East Pakistan perpetrated under the patronage of Lieutenant General Niazi have been delineated extensively. The impact of this mayhem was also witnessed and felt in India. India witnessed the movement of millions of refugees to India to escape the carnage in East Pakistan. It is estimated that around 10 million people left East Pakistan for India between April and December 1971. As we all know, India approached the UN Security Council and the General Assembly for a political solution to the crisis, but got a very lukewarm and inadequate response. The then Prime Minister, Madam Gandhi, diplomatic outreach to the European nations equally did not generate enough attention to the crisis. All the major powers, except then Soviet Union, due to the alliance politics of Cold War, were in favor of Pakistan. The timely signing of Treaty of Friendship with the former USSR was the keystone of Indian diplomacy and world strategy. United States and China both wisely abstained from active interference on behalf of Pakistan with the fear of escalation and possible intervention by the then Soviet Union. As we know, all the US Navy aircraft carrier Enterprise or Task Force 74 did enter the Indian Ocean, but kept away from the Bay of Bengal because the Enterprise was well aware that the Soviet fleet was not far off, and the presence of INS Vikram also served as a deterrent. Apart from liberating the whole province of the erstwhile East Pakistan, which later became Bangladesh, with the help of Mukti Bahini, the Indian military adopted robust defense on the Western Front, in the process ensuring balance and territorial integrity while capturing some territory. However, everything comes at a cost, and this war was no exception. Around 3,000 Indian soldiers died, nearly 12,000 were wounded. The foundation of Bangladesh is the blood and sweat of Mukti Jodhas, inspired by their indomitable and charismatic leader, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Our Bangladeshi friends will vividly remember India's contribution to this freedom. The strong bond of cooperation between the Indian and Bangladeshi soldiers during the war will always be remembered in the history of India and Bangladesh. Therefore, the war must be remembered. We must do so to pay homage to our fallen soldiers and for the special relationships between India and Bangladesh. Today, we are very grateful to have the message of His Excellency Vikram Doraiswami, Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh. His message further has stimulated the spirit of Indo-Bangladesh camaraderie. This is special because we celebrated Maitri Divas yesterday, the 6th December. We thank Mr. Muhammad Narul Islam, the Deputy High Commissioner of Bangladesh, Dr. Binoy George, Madam Smita Pant, for making this possible. Specifically, Madam Pant's involvement and guidance for this webinar has been invaluable, and we look forward to the continued engagement with the university. After a long time, it was a delight to see General Saha joining us. It was his vision year back and foresight to make the Swarnim verse of Vijay Divas a grand success. The personal narration by Ambassador Abul Hassan Mahmood Ali on Bangladesh diplomatic actions, his role in shaping the Bangladesh diplomatic agenda remains always monumental. Ambassador Chakravarty's erudite analysis of India's diplomatic actions was a pleasure for all of us to hear and learn from. And finally, Ambassador Nambiar's diplomatic experience fits so perfectly with this topic of international reactions and response. It was just a privilege for all of us. Since December last year, we have been fortunate to get first-hand accounts of the various battles fought unitedly by the armed forces of India and the Mukti Bahini against the oppression of Pakistani forces. Therefore, it is important to also put light on the diplomats of India and Bangladesh who were not short of gallantry when compared to armed forces. In today's webinar, which is the 12th in the series, it was absolutely a pleasure to learn Bangladeshi Indian diplomatic actions filled with the international reactions and response to the war. And therefore, I'm immensely proud and express this satisfaction to the School of Internal Security, Defense and Strategic Studies of the Rashtriya University, who has successfully completed this honorable project. Under the guidance and vision of General Saha, we have been organizing these monthly webinars so that the audience gets a veteran's perspective of these battles. The 12 webinars conducted by the school encompass the operational and personal accounts of 51 veterans participants and observers of the war. The webinar series is unique due to the personal account and recounts of both battles from Indian and Bangladeshi veterans, encompassing all three levels: strategic, operational, and tactical. These webinars would have been impossible without the efforts of the people who worked extensively on the monthly webinars. I would like to congratulate General Mistry, the current director of the school, for making possible the culmination of this series so successfully. Colonel Deepak Joshi, the former director in charge, along with the team, ensured that all the webinars were conducted smoothly and discussions remained consistent with the larger objectives of this initiative. The former and current members of the school, Kanchana Ramanujan, Isan Tong, Kritika Patil, Mohit Charan, Parna Verma, Bora, Ankit Kumar, Aditya Singh, all of them have worked very tirelessly to keep this vision of General Saha and of the university alive. Based on these webinars, RRU will release a book titled 50 Years of the 1971 War, Accounts from Veterans on 16 December. That is the 50th Vijay Diwas. I'm also very happy to inform you, to mark this moment, the RRU will have National Security and Police Scholarship for scholars from Bangladesh. And I look forward to welcome the first scholar very soon. I take this opportunity once again to congratulate the entire team for successfully completing this exercise. I'm confident that the school will continue to take up further important initiatives in future, and I look forward to such engagements by the school. Thank you once again to everyone for this unique initiative of the Rashtriya Raksha University. Jai Hind.
So with this, we can now end the event. Thank you very much to everyone for attending. For this wonderful discussion that we've had on the diplomatic actions. Thank you so much.